All right, gang. So here we are, Chapter 9, and we're going to deal with Windows 10 application support. And in this chapter, we're going to describe the application environments that are supported by Windows 10, modify and back up the registry, install various types of applications, describe and implement options for app compatibility, and configure clients for virtual desktops and RemoteApp. Now, the application environments. Apps are written to interact with a specific application environment subsystem. Apps use Application Programming Interfaces, APIs, to request services from the application environment subsystem. All of the application environments in Windows 10 restrict apps to running in user mode. You can only run in user mode, where they are isolated from the core functionality of the OS, and it ensures a poorly written app does not take out or affect the system stability when it comes to the OS. We've got two options. We've got Win32 and Win64. Applications are designed with Win32 subsystem, where the most common type of application in use with early OSs, the 32-bit applications. Now, the newer ones that we see coming out, it's 64-bit versions of Windows 10. It supports 32-bit as well as 64-bit or WOW64 virtualized environment. Now, the calls to a 32-bit API are translated to an equivalent Win64 API called in the 64-bit version of Win10 to provide compatibility. So depending on the version that we're dealing with, just remember, 32-bit is legacy, older. 64-bit is where we're heading today. We're not totally there, but we're getting there. Now, depending on the version of Win10 that we're dealing with, we may be fully Win64 or 64-bit. Now, the .NET framework is a commonly used application environment for applications on Windows 10. There are multiple versions of the .NET framework. In theory, the latest version is compatible with previous versions. In reality, some apps require specific versions. Updates for the .NET framework are delivered through Windows Update. And it's a layer of functionality that exists within Windows. The operating system utilizes that framework as well as the applications using that framework. Now, the Windows Store apps have been known as Metro apps, Modern apps, Windows Store apps, Universal, Windows Platform apps, and most recently known as Universal apps. Make it easier for developers to target multiple platforms. If you're running a 64-bit version of Windows, you cannot run DOS or Win16 applications. They're not compatible with the 64-bit OS. You got to use a 32-bit version of Win10 to support those older applications. It's because of that API. Okay. DOS applications are supported by a virtual instance of DOS. We have that. Okay, so in Windows, we've got what we call a registry. And the Win10 registry is a central store for application and OS configuration information. So what that means is, let's say I've got my OS and I've got a bunch of different applications installed on my system. All the information about that, the hows, the whens, the why, how it's going to work, what triggers it, what starts it up, all that data exists in the registry. And that registry is very sensitive and critical to the functionality of the applications as well as the OS. It's not something that anybody would take lightly when it comes to editing. In most cases, you do not need to manually edit or view the registry. I recommend do not make any changes or even go into the registry unless you know what you're doing. You don't need to understand the structure of the registry and how to modify it. But if you are in there and you're going to go mess with it, you do need to know. All right? It's very sensitive. Now, the registry structure is divided into sections and levels of data. Multiple sections exist to organize data by purpose. Individual sections, we call them hives. And within a single hive, data is stored in keys and values. They're identified by name and position relative to each other. Registry keys can contain sensitive information that can actually crash the computer or cause an application to not work. Here is a view of the registry editor. It's accessed using regedit, and here are the different keys. We talk about the different hives that exist within the registry. Classes root, current user, local machine users, and current config. The registry structure contains important settings for Win10 and the apps. The keys, the important keys in the hive, there we go. If you need to view and modify registry entries, back up that portion before you go do anything. Restrict the number of changes. Be careful as far as what you do when you do it. Regedit, as I said, that's our registry editor. It's a GUI. We can use it to search the registry, modify permissions, import and export sections of the registry. Reg.exe is a command line tool we can use to read data or write data to the registry using the scripted batch or command file. So here's the reg.exe. Now, one of the things we've got that we can use today is Windows PowerShell. Windows PowerShell, we can go, and it's similar to a command prompt. It's got more power because we've got the commandlets in it. Now, administrators are more likely to create new scripts and run Windows PowerShell than to create batch files and use reg.exe. Both HKCU and HKLM are configured as drives. You navigate through these drives by using the CD or dir, and those are aliases to PowerShell commandlets. They set the location and get the child item. The most common way traditional Win32 or .NET framework apps are packaged is in a .msi file. It's read by Windows Installer Service to perform the installation. So you've got an installation package called the file extension is .msi. All right, it's for app developers. The Windows Installer Service can take care of the details when it comes to app installation, repair, and removal. Some app developers don't use .msi files. These apps often lack repair functionality once they're installed. So they don't want you to get them out and modify them. I don't trust the ones that don't use MSIs. You can automate MSI installation. Here we can run it from command prompt using MSI exec.exe command line utility. We can dictate when, how, through scripts, go through software installation using the group policy management editor for software deployment. In large environments, better option for software deployment is the System Center Configuration Manager. You're able to deploy both MSI-based apps and newer WinStore apps. It can include transform files, more flexible in selecting users and computers for which the apps are going to be deployed. Now, we see more and more about the Windows Store apps, and they're designed for distribution through the Windows Store, not designed to be installed manually. Windows Store apps integrated into the Windows Store is integrated into Win10, and we go pull the apps down from the store. After sideloading is enabled, this certificate is used to sign the Windows Store app, must be trusted by the Win10 computer. You can install an app by using the add appx package commandlet through PowerShell. And we've got Microsoft Store for Business. There's more in that. We've got Office 365 ProPlus. Office 365 ProPlus has the equivalent functionality to Office Professional Plus 2016. Uses Click to Run for distribution. It streams the installation of Office 365 ProPlus, and it's a per-user licensing. So we've got in Win10, it's the first version of Win10 to include Package Management Framework. This provides the ability to obtain software from a central repository. It integrates with package managers that already run on Windows by using providers. If you have older apps that don't run properly on Win10, the preferred option is to upgrade the app to a newer version. Some apps do not have an upgraded version. You've got compatibility settings for executables. It's common issues that can be addressed are reliance on older Windows versions, display issues, reliance on administrative permissions. So how these things install and how they run, we've got to be cautious and understand where this came from and what it's going to be run for, what it's going to do. So we can go and do compatibility settings for executables. You can modify those settings. Then we've got the Application Compatibility Toolkit, ACT. It's got the Application Compatibility Manager, Inventory Collector Package, the ACT Log Processing Service, ACT Database, and the Microsoft Compatibility Exchange. We've also got Runtime Analysis Package that's part of it. Now, one of the things we've got in Windows 10, not in every version of Windows 10, but it is in certain versions of Windows 10, is Client Hyper-V. Now, you can run an older OS to keep using that application, and it virtualizes software for Win10. Allows you to create virtual machines with a completely independent operating system that shares the hardware on the computer running Windows 10. So let's say you've got a printer that's not compatible with Win10. You can connect it to a Win10 host machine, create a virtual machine running Windows XP that is compatible with that printer, and using that legacy operating system, you can talk to that printer. Or let's say you've got a legacy application that does not work well or won't work at all with Win10, but works with, say, Windows 95. I can create a Windows 95 virtual machine and install that software on that virtual machine, and it appears as if I'm running a Windows 95 machine, when in reality it is still Win10 as a host. Now, the potential downside to using Client Hyper-V. There's no easy way to move data from the virtual machine to the host computer. The OS in the virtual machine still needs to be managed with software updates and other management considerations. Some users find it confusing to use a separate virtual machine for some tasks. But it's a whole lot easier than having to have another machine set up just to be able to perform that task. It's a lot easier than having 3-4 computers sitting around because these applications are OS specific. Now, virtual desktop infrastructure and RemoteApp that allows Windows Server, it can host and provide access to virtual desktops. This functionality is provided by Remote Desktop Services. Now, the RDP, it's used to access the visual information for the app. By running the app on a remote computer, any application issues on the local computer, they're avoided. And we've got AppV, Application Virtualization. It's a technology that both deploys and manages applications. Apps are streamed to computers and can begin executing before all of the app files are on the destination computer. Now, the apps are distributed by using AppV, run in virtualized environment within the OS. So we've got Remote Desktop Services. Now, the role in Windows Server is that it provides a way to run apps on a remote server or virtual machine and have the display appear on a local machine. Now, here's an instance of that comparison. It'd be like we can run Office 365. It doesn't actually run on our local machine. It runs on the web. We can do the same kind of thing, and we don't have all that storage being taken up on our local machine. So we can do the same thing, remote desktop services, where we run the app on a remote server, but it appears like it's running on our machine. All right. Azure is really pushing this hard to where we've got versions running on Azure server, and it makes the ability to create new instances of the client machines less hardware reliant. We don't have to have as big a hard drive. It's all a matter of having that connection to the server where the remote desktop services are being hosted out. Okay. Here we'll go. We'll access remote desktop, type in the URL or the connection. There we go. So in Win10, it supports running applications by providing various application environments. The registry is a central store of configuration information for applications and operating system. To edit the registry, you can use a GUI, that's regedit, or reg.exe, which is a command line, or you can use PowerShell commandlets. A .msi based app is installed by the Windows Installer Service. Installation of Windows Store apps on desktop computers can be managed by using the Configuration Manager. Office 365 ProPlus installs by using a new technology called Click to Run. Windows provides some basic functionality for resolving app compatibility with Windows 10. Remote Desktop Services provides access to virtual desktops and remote app programs. So that's it. I'll see you in the next one. Keep up the hard work.